On the morning of December 2, 2012, the Sasago Tunnel on Japan's Chuo Expressway was carrying its usual Sunday traffic. Above them hung a ceiling, 270 concrete panels. Each one weighed 1.2 tons, suspended from the tunnel roof by steel bolts fixed into the concrete with adhesive. 324 tons held in place by chemistry. The adhesive holding those bolts had not been physically inspected in 12 years. At 8:03 a.m., 138 meters of that ceiling came down. 9 people died. This is the story of 324 tons held up by chemistry, and what happens when the chemistry fails. This tunnel had a fatal flaw, hiding in plain sight. Let's see how it broke down. The Sasago Tunnel runs for 4.7 kilometers beneath the mountains of Yamanashi Prefecture, west of Tokyo. Opened in 1977, it became one of the most critical links in the Chuo Expressway, the highway connecting the capital to central Japan. On any given day, tens of thousands of vehicles passed through it. It was infrastructure so essential that shutting it down for repairs meant paralysis for Tokyo-bound logistics. The tunnel had passed its most recent detailed inspection just 2 months earlier, in September 2012. Inspectors found no abnormalities. The inspection report was filed, the tunnel remained open, and the adhesive inside the bolt holes continued to dissolve. At 8:03 a.m. on December 2nd, a single anchor bolt lost its grip on the tunnel roof. The concrete panel it supported, 1.2 tons, dropped 5 meters onto the roadway below. The load that bolt had carried transferred instantly to the neighboring bolts. They were already weakened. They failed. In less than 5 seconds, 270 panels fell. 138 meters of ceiling became 138 meters of wreckage. 3 vehicles were buried, 1 caught fire. Within 60 seconds, smoke filled the tunnel. But the real question was not what fell. It was why it was still hanging in the first place. The tunnel needed ventilation. Every long tunnel did. In the 1970s, vehicle exhaust standards were far less strict than today, and a 4.7-kilometer tube filled with diesel fumes required a way to move air. The solution was a cross-flow ventilation system, a design that created air ducts by hanging concrete panels from the tunnel ceiling. Clean air flowed through one duct above. Exhaust was pulled through another. It was efficient. It was standard practice. And it required suspending hundreds of tons of concrete overhead permanently. The panels were fixed to the tunnel roof by steel bolts. The bolts were anchored into the concrete with a polyester resin adhesive. The design called for each bolt to withstand a pull-out force of 40 kilonewtons. At the time of construction, they did. But polyester resin has a chemical vulnerability. In the presence of moisture, its molecular chains break apart, a process called hydrolysis. The tunnel was a humid environment. Groundwater seeped through the rock above. Condensation formed on every surface. The resin was designed to last. After 35 years, post-accident testing found that some bolts had retained less than 30% of their original holding strength. Some registered 0. They were still in their holes. They were holding nothing. And this was only part of the problem. The specification called for the adhesive to fill the entire drill hole, 100% coverage. Post-accident core samples revealed fill rates below 50% in some locations. The bolts were embedded to an average depth of 120 millimeters. The specification required 130. The tunnel ceiling was not as smooth as the blueprints assumed. It undulated by as much as 24 centimeters in places, making consistent installation difficult. The designers had trusted the adhesive. The builders had done their best in imperfect conditions. And for 35 years, the structure held. So the anchor was dying. But a weakened bolt does not, by itself, bring down a ceiling. For that, you need a chain reaction. The ceiling was designed as a continuous structure, panel connected to panel, supported by a shared framework of steel beams hanging from the tunnel roof. There was no redundancy, no secondary support, no failsafe. Engineers call this a single-path structure. If one connection fails, the load does not distribute evenly across the system. It concentrates on the nearest surviving connection. When one bolt pulled free, the load on its neighbor doubled. The safety factor built into the original design was 3, but the adhesive had already lost 70% of its strength. A factor of 3 means nothing when the material can barely hold its own weight. The first bolt failed. Its load shifted to the next. That bolt, already degraded, could not absorb twice the design load. It failed. And the next, and the next. Investigators would later call this the zipper phenomenon. Like a zipper opening, the ceiling unraveled in a single continuous motion. 270 panels, 324 tons, in under 5 seconds. So the adhesive failed and the structure had no way to contain it. But even a catastrophic ceiling collapse does not automatically become unsurvivable. What made this one lethal was what happened next. The concrete panels that lined the tunnel ceiling were not cosmetic. They formed the walls of the ventilation ducts, the channels through which fresh air entered and exhaust was removed. When the panels fell, they did not merely crush what was below. They destroyed the ventilation system itself. One of the 3 buried vehicles caught fire within 30 seconds of impact. Without ventilation, the smoke had nowhere to go. Within 1 minute, visibility inside the tunnel dropped to less than 2 meters. The smoke moved through the tunnel at 2 to 3 meters per second. A person walking through that smoke could manage less than half a meter per second. The smoke was faster than the people. Roughly 70 people were still inside the tunnel when the collapse occurred. Drivers who had been behind the wreckage, now trapped in darkness. The carbon monoxide concentration in the tunnel reached an estimated 3,000 parts per million. The lethal threshold is 1,500. This was double. At those levels, unconsciousness can occur within minutes. 17 minutes after the collapse, the tunnel's exhaust fans shut down entirely. Not because they malfunctioned, because the ducts they were connected to no longer existed. The system designed to clear smoke in an emergency had become part of the debris. Firefighters arrived at the tunnel entrance 11 minutes after the collapse. They could not enter. The smoke was impenetrable, and a second collapse was possible. Monitoring instruments detected millimeter-scale shifts in the remaining ceiling panels. 3.5 hours later, rescue operations were suspended. For the 9 people under the wreckage, it had been over from the first second. The impact energy of a single falling panel was approximately 62 kilojoules. A passenger car roof is rated to withstand single-digit kilojoules. The difference was not close. In the zone directly beneath the collapse, survival rate was 0. The fuel was the adhesive, a polyester resin that had been chemically dissolving for 35 years, reducing bolt strength to less than a third of its design value. The path was the structure, a single chain of panels with no redundancy, where the failure of one bolt doubled the load on the next, unzipping 138 meters of ceiling in under 5 seconds. The trap was the ceiling itself, the ventilation duct that, once fallen, sealed the tunnel in smoke and carbon monoxide, eliminating every means of escape and rescue. The physics gave them no chance. The tunnel had passed its inspection 2 months earlier. The September 2012 inspection, the one that found nothing, was conducted from the ground. Inspectors looked up at the ceiling through binoculars. They never climbed to the ceiling to examine the bolts up close. They never touched them. They never struck them with a hammer. This was permitted. Japan's Road Act, Article 42, required that roads be maintained in good condition. The law used the phrase "shall endeavor," an effort-based obligation, not a mandate. It specified no method, no frequency, and it did not mention ceiling panels at all. The tunnel's operator, Nexco Central Japan, had been privatized in 2005 as part of a national reform of the country's highway system. The company's management plan, called Challenge 5, set a target of reducing maintenance costs by 30%. The maintenance budget was cut. Inspection contracts flowed from Nexco to a subsidiary, then to subcontractors below. At one subcontractor, annual revenue from maintenance work dropped from 2.3 billion yen to 900 million yen between 2009 and 2011. The method that could detect bolt degradation was hammering, tapping each bolt and listening for the sound of loose adhesive. Hammering required scaffolding, climbing into the ceiling space, and testing each bolt individually. It was expensive. It was slow. It was replaced with distant visual observation, looking up from the road. For 12 years, no one physically touched the bolts that held 324 tons above the highway. Post-accident experiments showed that even skilled inspectors using the hammer method detected abnormalities only about 60% of the time. But 60% was infinitely more than zero. 9 people died. Prosecutors investigated Nexco Central Japan's executives for professional negligence resulting in death. Under Japanese criminal law, conviction requires proving that the accused could have foreseen the specific time and manner of the accident. The prosecution could not establish that any individual executive knew precisely when the ceiling would fall. All 8 suspects were cleared. The families of the 9 victims sought criminal accountability. They received a civil settlement of approximately 440 million yen. No one went to prison. In 2014, Japan's Road Act was amended. Before, inspectors could look from a distance. After, close visual inspection became mandatory for all tunnels, every 5 years, no exceptions. Before, ceiling panels and other attachments were a low-priority afterthought. After, every bolt, bracket, and fixture was classified as a mandatory inspection target. Before, each operator set its own grading system. After, a unified national scale, levels 1 through 4, was imposed on every road in the country. Japan now has one of the most rigorous tunnel inspection regimes in the world. Most tunnels with suspended ceilings have since had their panels removed entirely. But the inspection law guarantees diagnosis. It does not guarantee treatment. Across Japan, bridges and tunnels classified as requiring early action number in the tens of thousands. Many belong to rural municipalities with neither the budget nor the engineers to repair them. 6 years before Sasago, a tunnel ceiling in Boston collapsed. Different country, different adhesive, same physics. Concrete panels suspended overhead by steel bolts fixed with epoxy resin, 26 tons that fell onto a moving car. 1 person died. In Boston, the adhesive failed by creep, a slow deformation under sustained load, pulling the bolts free over 7 years. In Sasago, it failed by hydrolysis, water dissolving the resin over 35 years. Both tunnels trusted a polymer to hold concrete overhead indefinitely. Neither polymer did. After Boston, criminal charges were filed. The settlement exceeded $450 million. After Sasago, all 8 suspects were cleared. The families received a civil settlement. The United States enacted federal tunnel inspection standards in 2015. Every tunnel, every 24 months. Japan amended its Road Act in 2014. Close visual inspection every 60 months. The physics was identical. The accountability was not. Today, the Sasago Tunnel carries traffic again. The ceiling panels are gone, replaced by jet fans that require no suspended structure at all. Across Japan, inspectors now climb into tunnel ceilings with hammers, lights, and checklists mandated by national law. The concrete and the bolts are new. The chemistry is the same.